Final Fantasy IX is one game that many people have been wanting to see get remade for some time now. With the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy nearing its third and final entry, I wouldn't be surprised if Square Enix is getting ready to reveal their next big remake project very soon. We all know that Final Fantasy IX Remake is one game that has been heavily rumored for years now, and a couple months ago there was even an Epic database leak which also revealed information on a Final Fantasy IX related game with DLC and a bunch of other content that would indicate that the project was very far along. Besides that, we have yet to know the scale of the project or how many games it'll be. But Final Fantasy XIV and 16 producer Yoshi-P talks about his thoughts on what the scale of a potential Final Fantasy IX remake could look like. So if you are brand new to the channel, do not forget to like the video and subscribe to keep up to date with anything JRPG related. We're gonna have some Kingdom Hearts related content as well as Metaphor ReFantazio, as that game is right around the corner, so you do not want to miss it. Be sure to keep up with all of that on the channel and more. So if you weren't aware of all of the leaks and rumors that have been happening around this project for years now, a Final Fantasy IX remake was among many of the Nvidia leak listings that happened way back in what I believe was 2021. And a lot of those games now have either been confirmed or have already come out at this point. Of course, we've had so much information about this remake, where it's at, what type of team is developing it, and so much more. There have been so many leaks and information currently that I would say that this project is very much a real game. A game that I would think is very far along in development as of now. And even developers within Square Enix can't really confirm or deny whether the game is real because there's just so much information at this point that I think we all know it's happening. Yoshi-P gives his thoughts about this by saying that he is wary about this potential remake because it could balloon into multiple parts. As we know that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is split into a trilogy because of its ambitious scale. He goes further into this by saying, quote, "Of course, I do know that there are requests for Final Fantasy IX to be made, but when you think about Final Fantasy IX, it's a game with huge volume. When you think about all of that volume, I wonder if it's possible to remake that as a single title. It's a difficult one. It is a tough question." Now, obviously, he is just giving his thoughts on the matter and this shouldn't really be taken seriously, but I do think it's interesting that Yoshi-P brings up the fact that Final Fantasy IX Remake could be in multiple parts. I think currently everybody was assuming that because this project was said to be a lot smaller in scale than the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, that there was just no way that they were going to repeat what those games were doing, and maybe stick to creating one full game. Now, there are two sides to this because I know a lot of people who don't mind the multiple parts, and others who absolutely hate it, especially after experiencing 7 Remake. Now, whichever way you look at it, the Remake trilogy is very successful when it comes to fan reception, at least so far. Financially, the games have been a lot less than expected for Square Enix's standards. And there are a lot of other factors that play into that, but I do think the large part of that reason is because of the fact that these games are split into multiple entries. Sure, exclusivity is another major factor, but while the FF7 Remake has great reception amongst the fans, an episodic release clearly shows diminishing returns despite Rebirth being the better game in pretty much every aspect. And both of these games started out as an exclusive. It's much easier to garner hype for one game, putting in all your eggs in one basket, than to do so for multiple entries spread across a handful of years in between each release. The Final Fantasy VII Remake games are only as big as they are because they fundamentally change how certain story events will play out, how long you spend your time in certain sections of the original game. And yeah, Yoshi-P is certainly correct. A lot of the PS1 era games are big in scale, at least for the time, but they are games that can also be played and finished in about 40 to 50 hours. I think for this potential 9 remake, it is absolutely okay to stick closer to the original game's layout so that you can still cover everything in one entry and have it feel more like a cohesive package. There's no need to be as ambitious as Final Fantasy VII Remake, and you can still create something fresh and exciting without fundamentally changing how Final Fantasy IX was told, played, or looked. At least that's how I see it. I know some people will want their favorite Final Fantasy to be this big thing like 7 Remake, but I just don't really think that's necessary here. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that creating a big 100+ hour RPG can be as fulfilling if it's handled correctly. I am 100% serious when I say that as long as they give us a Final Fantasy IX with souped up graphics that still keeps that cartoonish stylized art style you see in the original, turn-based combat that iterates on the original formula and gives us something familiar but fresh, that is literally all I need. Otherwise, besides that, everything else should be one for one, especially when we're talking about the story. Because even though Final Fantasy VII Remake is very well received, there has always been a split in the fan base when it comes to how they approach the story in the remake. I also think that world map traversal should also stay the same. I don't think there is anything wrong with not having a true open world. Just make that PS1 style world map traversal and translate that into a remake. There are plenty of JRPGs that still use that chibi style traversal for a world map, and it'll also save a lot of development costs and time for the project. It can keep that same charm that the older Final Fantasy games had while building off of systems that worked in the original. Because the way I see it, there is nothing wrong with keeping it traditional, at least when it comes to these remakes. I do think that a Final Fantasy IX remake is very real and very close now. From everything we've seen from all the leaks and rumors, it sounds like it is far into development, and I don't think it is unreasonable to expect some sort of teaser or confirmation that this game is out there this year. The only other likely event we'll see this at is at the Game Awards this December. So tell me what you guys think about the idea that another Final Fantasy remake could be an episodic release. Are you someone who doesn't mind this sort of release, or is it something you do not want to see in the future? Is one game enough to adapt everything in Final Fantasy IX? A more one-to-one adaptation of the original game? Hopefully soon, we won't have to wait too much longer to find out.